The price tag was $100,000. Exactly. I like my jaw was like on the floor.
Yes, for listeners, both of our jaws literally just like hit. If they could hit the floor, they would have hit the floor.
This is still a money podcast. $100,000 and it's an AI tool.
Oh, wake up, rethink the status quo. When you get your money right, then you're the one who runs your life. Come build a wealthy spirit with Sammy and Michelle.
Are you like me, alone this Valentine's Day? Swiping on the apps, left, right, hoping that Cupid algorithm will find you a person. No, that's not how we do things here at Build a Wealthy Spirit. We are about approaching everything differently, whether it comes to your money, your love life. We know that the things that are important to you, you have to be intentional. You have to think about what you value. And we're all about figuring out a way to reach your goals in unconventional manners. I'm so excited to have Chen on Build a Wealthy Spirit today.
Michelle and I heard Oz speak at Campfire, and that's when he mentioned his matchmaking program, a program to help him find his future spouse and soulmate.
Yeah, and if you listen to the Build a Wealthy Spirit podcast, if you listen to some of our other interviews, like on the Earn and Invest podcast, you'll remember that I had a piece that I wrote about a referral, a dating bounty. So when Chen mentioned that he had his own matchmaking program, he had his own referral service for dates, I knew we had to chat with him because I just love people who approach common problems differently. And it doesn't hurt that he also writes about personal finance and living a life that's in alignment.
Chen is a seasoned user experience professional who has worked with Transamerica, Disney, and Boeing. As a serial entrepreneur, he founded his own UX education company. He exemplifies the Build a Wealthy Spirit ideals as he has traveled the world as a digital nomad. Oz is currently serving as a content designer for Credit Karma. He's a financial educator, and he curates a weekly newsletter merging psychology and finance at ozchen.com. On top of that, Oz has been writing about relationships since the era of Zanga blogs. He recently created a matchmaking program to help him find his soulmate, and he's here to share his strategy with us just in time for Valentine's Day. Please welcome Chen.
Hey,
Welcome,
thanks.
Oz. Hey, Oz. Welcome to Build a Wealthy Spirit.
Thank you. That was such a fun intro, a better one than I could have done myself. About the Zanga thing, just to date myself a little bit, I should have said that like I've been blogging since the Zanga days, but I definitely wasn't in a relationship then. I was more of an angsty emo kid, in his teenage years, being like, let me put some music and some words on Zanga and get some e-props.
That was going to be our first question, Oz, was back in the Zanga days. Mm-hmm. You were probably a young guy back then. Like, what were you talking about? But I think that might answer it, unless you were giving some dating advice as a young lad.
I was not. No, I haven't. I didn't get interested in girls at all. Like, I didn't really was that interested until high school.
Oh, got it. That makes complete sense. So that brings us to our first question. Leading up to the creation of this matchmaking program, which we are going to get into, what had your dating experience been like?
Honestly, pretty good and adventurous. I would say that I started online dating with OkCupid, and that was like my very first online dating experience. And then soon after that, Tinder came out. So I was using OkCupid when it was like just kind of decreasing in popularity. It was still like a really neat thing. It was super personality based. And then when Tinder was coming out, I was like, oh, what is this like? It rose with the mobile age. And I remember being pretty early in terms of using Tinder, like probably a year or two after it came out.
It's really interesting that you were so on top of the tech when it came to some of the new things. Like, I think I was a few years off of the swiping dating apps just because of the relationship status that I was in. But it doesn't surprise me because I feel like you have a good pulse on what's going on in the tech space. But I think that's also interesting now that we're almost going back in time with your matchmaking program. So there are two parts to your dating strategy. You have your matchmaking program, you have the Date Me doc, and we were wondering, what inspired you to create the matchmaking program in the first place?
So I'm not original. I was inspired by my friend who did this at a smaller scale, just amongst us. There was probably about like 6 or 7 of us that she told, hey, I kind of have a marriage referral bonus. If you guys, find me my eventual husband, then there's going to be like a prize for you. So what I noticed was that we had always thought, oh yeah, of course, if we know someone, we'll tell our friends, right, who are single and looking. But this really activated us, and it also gave us a sense that our friend was serious. So there was this spirit of enrollment that was there that wasn't before. And noticing that happened with me and my group of friends, that was one point of inspiration for myself to do this. But I sat on the idea for a couple of years, because that was like 2-3 years ago when my friend did that challenge. And then I would say that I had a relationship end, and then I think it's really healthy to take a break in between relationships. And so when I came back, I was like, okay, I feel ready to date now, but I want to do it my way, and I want to try different things and on my own terms. So one of the principles, I only have one rule of dating. Do y'all want to guess what it is?
I know, because I remember you telling us at campfire.
Okay. Good memory.
What is it?
My one rule of dating is to not get jaded.
Yes.
And when you said that, I loved it so much. It totally resonated, because it's like whenever you get jaded, that's kind of a sign that you need to take a little break. Because
exactly,
there's no reason to be trying to date if you're so jaded.
That's something that I've noticed, because my dating app experience was like pre-COVID, post, like 3 years after COVID. I'm back on the apps. And the one thing that really sticks out to me is a lot of people seem tired. Like the comments,
even in their bio.
Their bios, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see a fish. I don't want to be the person with the fish. Like people they're clearly, it's like, you've been on this for too long.
A lot of fish talk.
I was going to ask, do you see men talk about they're tired of seeing profiles with fish?
Men will be like, oh, I don't have a fish in my profile. Don't worry. They'll like talk smack about other men.
That's so
like it's
funny.
going to full circle. And I'm like, no. Like, I just want to know about you. I don't need to know about like addressing all of these cultural things that are happening. You can feel when people are jaded. And I can't blame anybody for it, but it just makes it more difficult to meet people.
There's a real dating fatigue, and there is work in dating with messaging and putting time and energy into it. And so I think because of that, perhaps people's expectations are like either too high or more like, I'm going to find someone right away, but without recognizing that there's work into it. I think it's really easy to have that fatigue build up and then get jaded about it. And I'm only speaking from experience, because I've noticed that happened to me in the past. And then I realized, okay, I need to manage myself. And that means like I also have a personal rule that if I go back to online dating, it's always seasonal. So it's like 3 months on and then 3 months off. That's just a personal thing for myself, where I'm like, it's easier for me when I frame it and give myself like a boundary. And it's, I think that's also related to a question I often get asked, where people love to project their values or their assumptions about dating, right?
Yes,
all the time.
About everything.
Yeah, about everything. So one of the common ones I get, especially from my friends who are not single, they're like, maybe try like not on the dating apps, because like I just heard this friend, that friend, they don't use the dating apps, and then they met organically offline, right? And I would have to say I'm very 50-50. I've had relationships from people I met offline, and I've also had relationships I met online. So I feel like I have a pretty fair and balanced view, where I'm not just like, online dating is so horrible, or offline dating is the only way to do it. I'm like, these are just approaches. These are just tools. And kind of having that healthy distance helps me not get jaded, and also like just keep making it fun for myself. So that dovetails into, okay, with this season of dating, I want to make it fun and try different things, right? So that's where my mind wandered back to my friend who did this love bounty, marriage referral bonus thing. And I was like, I want to do the same for myself and try it.
I really want to highlight what you said there, which is, one, it's so important to make things like dating fun, to make it something that you can go and really put time and effort into, like do the work, because it's both of those things. Like you said, it can be fun, and after a while it can be exhausting. Or maybe you're on the apps and you're swiping and swiping and swiping, and at first it's fun, but you get a little tired. And I love that you have these seasons of datings, because even if you're somebody who's single listening to this and maybe you don't want to do anything too unconventional, at the least, be mindful of how you feel and consider a break every now and then. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Totally.
I know our listeners are dying to know, what does a matchmaking program look like? Like, how is it laid out?
Okay. So as a writer, I considered a couple different names. The first one was, it was like Oz's Love Bounty. And then I just like branding things. But then I shopped it around with some of my friends, and my female friends were like, that might kind of come off the wrong way. So then like I landed on a matchmaking program, which basically how it works is that it's very straightforward, is that if you introduce me to my eventual soulmate, long-term partner, then there will be a monetary reward. And the idea is that I actually looked into matchmaking programs for reference. And so there were dollar amounts anywhere from like $500 up to like tens of thousands of dollars. So that gave me a reference point. So I was thinking like, why don't I just do this for myself and cut out the middleman? And I also have friends. I know good people. I have a good network. So why don't I DIY it first?
Yeah, don't give See My Auntie your tens of thousands of dollars. Like, people drop a bag on matchmakers, especially the Indian ones. So we definitely understand that. And I love this idea of just putting it in your own hands and incentivizing your friends and letting them know you're serious, like you were saying earlier.
And so a little nuts and bolts. How much are the rewards?
Oh, I almost want to send people there first. So it's ozchen.com/matchmaker. And it's basically an invitation to read about like, here's what I mean by matchmaking. So the monetary reward is $5,000. And I thought a lot about this. First, I like also would poll my friends. I would say like, hey, imagine I'm doing this thing. And for the effort of like getting you excited enough to like, you know, refer me to someone, like what's an amount that comes to my mind? Of course, all my friends are nice, and they were like, oh, of course we'll do it for free and whatever. But I was like, no, but really, like tell me an amount. And they're like, you know, probably at least like 1,000. One of my friends, he's much younger. He's like, I don't know, $75. I was like, oh. I was like, maybe I should have went with you first.
Do you know any older women?
Exactly. So, you know, that was an amount that I felt landing on 5,000 was like, okay, I felt like this was an amount that did like make people excited, and they also saw how serious I was about it. But it wasn't such a crazy amount that it would create a perverse incentive.
Yeah.
Because I really thought about like, okay, who's going to get with me for 2 years for $5,000? You know, and
yeah,
and
that's a used car, but not a new car.
That car ain't running very well for $5,000.
Yeah. Oh, and I mentioned 2 years because, you know, marriage could be a long road. So then I said, hey, after a year of you introducing me to, you know, my soulmate, if we're like on the path to marriage, I want to show you my appreciation and just like send you the first half. So $2,500.
Wow, dividends.
Yeah. And then
I like that.
Let's say when we get married, you'll be invited to the wedding and there'll be the other $2,500 waiting for you at the wedding.
Oh, I like that.
Like a nice thank you and recognition of like bringing us two together.
That friend is also then holding you accountable to make sure you get married. Like, you're engaged. When are you guys scheduling the wedding?
Yeah. I also did like, hey, in case that my partner and I decide to not get married, but we're like basically life partners, after 2 years, I'll send the rest to you.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, because I believe in marriage, but it's not as much of a must for me.
I would like to validate that amount is a good amount. Michelle, also wrote how I was looking for a partner last year. This was when we were living in a small town in Blythe. I was desperate, and I told my friends, similarly, I would give them $1,000. They laughed in my face. They were like, "What? Like $1,000 is literally nothing." They were like, we would do it for free, but also they were like, no, we want to do like something crazy. They're like, we don't need your money. Like, you don't even have the money. Like they were just so like, they like thought it was a joke, but then they were like kind of starting to negotiate it with me. They were like, on your wedding, we want to ask her anything. I was like, no. And then I was like, fine. You know what? If you were successful, I'm starting to even doubt that you'll get there. You guys are too caught up in the incentive. But I will say, once they started to warm up to the idea, to your point, all of a sudden, these people who I have known for a decade have never introduced me to anybody. All of a sudden, pulling out their Instagrams. Oh, what about this guy? Oh, what about that guy you work with? That guy you play, club soccer with. I'm like, who are these people?
Exactly.
So I want to validate the amount, and also that people will put in more effort if they just know you're more serious.
Yeah, they know that you're more serious. And I noticed the same thing where, before I've asked my friends a couple of times, just casually like, hey, if you know anyone, hey, I'm single. And they're like, yeah, of course, man. It was like night and day when I told them about the bounty reward and the matchmaking program. They like pulled out their phone on the spot. And they were like looking for like contacts. I was like, yeah, what a night and day difference,
Yeah, no, it's funny. True. I remember one of my friends being like just me being single. And he was like, oh yeah, one of my other friends is single. And I'm like, oh, like, what's he like? And he's like, well, he's a little arrogant. And I'm like, oh, is he like attractive? And they're like, no. And I'm like, do you hate me? Like, is it funny? No. Like, clearly I need a bounty because
for some reason people, if you just ask them, they think of their one friend who just like cannot
like the single
find
person
a partner.
who's like single for a reason.
Yeah, they're like, oh, what about Fred? Fred's been single forever.
He's alone and he would really benefit from having a partner.
He doesn't leave his house.
Maybe that will help.
Right. That's also why I wanted to frame this as a matchmaking program, because it's like, it's about finding the right match. It's not just like, can I get a date or can I just like get a partner? It's like, no, it's not about that. Like, you two are attractive, smart, intelligent ladies. That's not something that'll be a problem for you if you just want to like get Fred off the street or something, right?
Just anybody, yeah.
Just anybody. That's not what you're about, right? It's like more of like you want to find your life partner. And that takes a lot more intention.
Speaking of intentionality, one thing that I did not really know about until we met you at Camp Fi, it was your Date Me doc. At first I was like, a Date Me doc? What is this? Is this just like a profile? But when I read through yours, I was like, this is so thorough. Like, you can tell this person is serious about dating. Can you tell us a little bit about the Date Me doc for those people who don't know about it?
Yeah. I was talking to a friend, Brandon Lee, who does a lot of these experiments. And then I read through his dating doc, which is like, I kid you not, probably 10 times longer than mine. But then, going down that rabbit hole, I found out like what a Date Me doc was. And it's basically a mini internet trend of people who want to go outside the confines of a traditional online dating app where you can only say so much, right? And also you have to be on the dating app. Whereas this one, you could literally do a super low-tech version of like Google Docs. I don't know why they coined it Date Me Doc, but I guess it kind of has a little bit of a ring to it, alliteration.
Yeah, that's true.
Solid branding, 10 out of 10.
Date Me Doc, it's kind of clear what it is.
I first perused a bunch of Date Me Docs. There's a Notion directory out there that someone put together that like you could submit your own Date Me Doc. I have since done that. It was like twofold because I actually started the matchmaking program first.
Oh.
That was like the idea that I had. And then a bunch of my friends who I was sending it, they were like, well, what's your type? Like, well, what are you looking for? I was like, oh, that's right. Like, I have to like really get clear about this. So in the process of reading other people's Date Me docs and thinking about what I want to put in my own, regardless of anyone who, if no one ever sees it, it was a really helpful exercise for myself. Because it forced me to put down on paper, what do I value? If the general public finds it, like, what do I want them to know about me? And actually several friends who've read my Date Me talk, they were like, I didn't know this about you. It was really cool. They were like, oh, I didn't know you had like some of these dreams about like, building community and like being more of a digital nomad and again, or like traveling the world with like, a future partner. I think it's a little bit the same phenomenon as like if you go through your friend's like Tinder profile or Hinge profile, you'd be like, oh, this is what you're putting out there.
Yes.
It
Yeah,
has
I
a
loved
bit of the
it.
same effect.
I don't want to get woo-woo about it, but it's almost like a manifestation exercise. You know, you're really like creating in your imagination the type of person that you'd want to meet. And I think just being really thoughtful and detailed about that can be so helpful too. And then also people who come and read it, they're like, this person took time to like really think about what they want. So then they know you're serious too. They know you're not just like quickly making a profile and like looking for anybody. You're like very deliberate and you want to find your life partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that I really try to approach it not as like an endless list of qualifications, but also say like what I think I bring to the table. Because everything that I put there that I'm looking for, I feel like I have that quality to some extent. So it's not just like a wish list.
And the other thing I like is on the Date Me doc, you can kind of get more specific than you can on the apps or other things. For example, I saw when you were talking about specifics about the type of person you're looking for and kids, you're like, I'm looking for someone, you know, in their mid-20s to early 30s. If you said that alone, then maybe people would be like, why is that? But then you were able to elaborate and say that it's because you want to have children. So if somebody has frozen their eggs or, you know, has done other things to make sure that they can have children, then they would be a potential match too.
Yeah, thanks for noting that nuance. I think nuance is difficult to have on a Date Me doc.
In a dating app?
Sorry, you're right, in a dating app. So whoever finds your Date Me doc, that's already a filter because it's like, one, they have to find it somehow. And then two, they actually read.
Yes. Not a crazy bar to have.
Not a crazy bar, but it does come with it. It is a filter. And I want to say something that ties together what you mentioned about manifestation and also things that you two are doing, which is that I think as like someone who puts stuff on the internet, who blogs, and you two obviously, you know, newsletter, podcast, Instagram, there's something that tickles my mind about like increasing the surface area of opportunity, of spontaneity, of serendipity. So like internet powered serendipity, right? And that has happened to me before. Like I actually met my closest friend, one of my closest friends, and now roommate from the internet, from blogging.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, how? What's the story behind that?
Oh, that's a longer story. But basically I found his blog. And then I went to his about section and he was actually like in Orange County at the time. I was like, oh, hey, like, I like what you're up to. Like, let's hang out. So yeah, we became friends.
I definitely want to highlight what you're saying there because I think regardless of if you're in the dating world or not, publishing things online has so much power. We've had so many amazing opportunities come from it, mentorships, people who are just able to come back into our life. Like a lot of people who listen to this podcast are people who are our friends, but then listened to it and said, hey, I'm interested in The Alchemist, or I'm interested in the books that you talk about. And that was just like a really great way to reconnect. I've had job opportunities come from writing online. And I wrote about getting fired. And the person who hired me was like, yeah, I think we think similarly about work life. And I was like, yeah, we do, I guess.
That's
but
awesome.
it's interesting. I think we're so shy to share things online. Like I was such a perfectionist. I was like, what if people read this? But actually what I found is the opposite, like what you're saying, which is whether it's relationships, roommates, job opportunities, just friends, there's so much power in publishing your thoughts online and finding like-minded people.
Yes. It's like if you share yourself in the most authentic way, and the more vulnerable you can be about that comfortably, the better, then the more likely you are to find your people out there too.
Absolutely. And a question for you two. Have you ever wondered about like, oh, I'm like making a piece of content and maybe I'm talking about love. I'm talking about relationships. I wonder who's going to end up reading this. Like, I wonder what that experience is like for you two as content creators.
Well, it's funny when I wrote about my own dating bounty, rearranged marriage, it's one of my most popular pieces. So it was referenced on the Earn and Invest podcast when we went to go talk with Doc G. Many more people read it and have commented on it, or I've been in breakout rooms with people on Zoom calls and they've referenced it. I think to answer your question, at the time, it was just another essay I was writing. It was one that I was really excited about because I put a little bit of extra effort into it. I thought it was like pretty funny, but I didn't expect it to reach as many people as it did. But it was cool because not only did some people set me up, some people did pay attention and they were like, hey, like I know somebody. But also a few people, like in mine, I talk a little bit about how it's very similar to arranged marriages and like Indian culture, and people of other cultures were sort of sharing their story with me. So it definitely reached more people than I expected. But it is funny because sometimes it's like you post something, you're like, oh my God, everybody's going to see this, and nobody sees it. And sometimes you share something and, you know, it was the most viral thing I had, I guess.
Yeah, and great branding, rearranged marriage. Like, it just pops up into my head so that like I've sent it to other friends. Be like, hey, check out this article.
Yeah, oh, good.
I know. Yeah, I love the title. It's like ChatGPT couldn't do it.
Sometimes it comes to you, you know what I mean? But it's that was a lucky one. I was like literally finishing it up and I was like, oh, you know what this is like? And then it worked out well.
Yeah, I can't say I've had a similar experience. But one thing I will say is with dating people now having a podcast, like sometimes people will listen to the podcast, like at least a little bit. And then I do feel like they kind of know me a little better than maybe they would through like a profile or something like that. And I'm like, they maybe get a little better sense of who I am. And if they still like that, then they probably do like me. So not for sure, but it's just another indicator that we'll get along.
The podcast is your unofficial dating profile.
It's it just like a few hundred episodes is all you need.
Yeah. Make sure
First
you
listen,
at least
and
like
then we'll
listen 50 of them before you come talk to me.
Please run up our download numbers. That would be excellent.
That's what the real plan is.
Based off that question that you asked us, Oz, I kind of want to put that back to you. And also, I'm curious to know, how do you feel you are in terms of being vulnerable in your writing or your date me doc even, versus how vulnerable you are with your friends or maybe even acquaintances?
So I think I felt more vulnerable writing the date me doc more than I expected, in a way of like, oh, this is going on. It's now having a digital footprint. And typically I'm very open and feel super comfortable talking about a range of topics, especially with friends. But this felt different than like putting out a regular blog post. I'm sure like when you put out Rearranged Marriage, there's like maybe a different energy or charge behind it. It's like, ooh, like I'm really like talking about another aspect of my life in detail. Maybe in a similar way that people feel about talking about money. There's some people who feel like super comfortable like detailing their net worth journey and all of that stuff, you know, as we know in the FI community. But it's also like talking about love and what you're specifically like looking for. Thoughts came up in my mind of like, oh, well, people think this is weird. What people think I'm being too specific, not specific enough. Is this embarrassing? What if my coworkers find it? Like, is that weird? You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, which is a little bit different than like publishing an article about why maxing out your 401k is good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the date me doc is probably like one of the more vulnerable things that a person could share really online. And I did. When I read yours, I was like, oh my gosh. Because it was so vulnerable, I felt very like connected to you in reading it. I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I met you, so like, it matched up with the person that I met. I'm like, okay, this matches Oz. Like I can see him writing this. But it was just really enjoyable to read. Like it was very touching.
Oh, that warms my heart. that actually really helps validate, I guess, like a worry that I had, which is like one of the things I've seen on Reddit threads when I search like date me docs is people who are like, oh, this is so hyper optimized and these people are being so unrealistic, and just the fact that date me docs like exist is like makes me ill. And I'm like, wow, at least we have a very strong reaction to this thing. The fact that, you know, you reflected back, hey, I felt like I got to know you better. That's all I could hope for.
Yes. And I think also a great example of the difference of the people who are around you 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degrees away from you versus people on, I don't know, Reddit who sometimes, you know, like really great information I get off of there. And sometimes in situations like this, it's like you're not in the arena. You're so quick to criticize, and you're not putting your own dog out there. You don't know what it takes. You don't know that, you're being such a perfectionist about it, even in somebody else's date me dog. And I think that's an interesting criticism. And also, I'm glad you highlighted that, because if you're listening to this and you are thinking about doing a date me dog, once again, no one might see it, honestly. And two, if they do, it's a good thing. And it's not going to be one of those situations, probably, that you're just going to get ripped apart online. Things just don't go viral like that.
Yes. It reminds me of one of my new favorite quotes, which is, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. And I think if that's the type of person who's going to resonate, they're going to understand. And if it's somebody who doesn't get it, maybe that's a filter.
Wow, that's so romantic. I love that. You can't say the wrong thing to the right person.
We've been saying that a lot, especially when we feel like we said the wrong thing.
Probably within limits. But
who knows? You work through things regardless.
Yeah.
Or you learn, maybe that person is a teacher in your life.
Yeah. For me to get really jazzed and excited about doing something, which I totally was in this process, it's usually a confluence of different influences. So one of them was in the background of my mind. It was my high school friend who did something similar a couple years back. Another one was my friend who actually shared with me his date me doc. But this was another one that really got me interested. And it's different. It's a little bit more indirect. A friend shared with me this AI matchmaking service. And basically, he was sharing this TikTok video of me with me, talking about how if this service finds your eventual soulmate, the price tag was $100,000. Exactly.
Oh my
my jaw was on the floor.
For listeners, both of our jaws literally just hit.
Right?
If they could hit the floor, they would have hit the floor.
Yeah.
This is still a money podcast. $100,000 and it's an
Exactly.
AI tool.
Yeah. Obviously with a human matchmaking behind it and all that. And so actually really thinking through this scenario helped me, it actually incentivized me to put out my own matchmaking service. Because what it did for me, other than after the initial sticker shock, I was thinking, is this a $100,000 investment or is this a $100,000 effort that I want to put in?
Ooh, could you clarify the difference there?
Yeah, so I borrowed this mental model from Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek.
Loved him.
Yeah.
Huge fans.
Love his mental models. And one of his was when he was running his startup that he eventually sold, he had this rule because he wanted to delegate things. And people kept coming to him. He's like, how do I remove myself from the equation? And then so he had some rule hey, if it's under $200 or if it's a $300 problem, don't even call me. Just take care of it, spend the money, I'll reimburse you. And then so that kind of gave me this framing of sizing problems and giving myself a frame of reference for whether it's a business idea that I want to pursue. For example, I applied that very same idea to I was thinking about getting a master's in design when I was getting into UX. But then at the same time, I was starting to sell courses and doing UX consulting, my own business. And then I was well, let me take that same $60K that I was going to spend on 1 year of getting that master's and see if I could make the same amount of money or more. I did. And so I was okay, well, that I was able to size that problem and give myself some frame of reference. So kind of thinking about okay, is finding my soulmate a $100,000 problem?
Ooh,
I started kind of I know it sounds...
Yes. We won't tell your soulmate.
I don't know.
What was more important for me was not the price tag, but what does a $100,000 effort look like from coming from myself?
And what does that look like?
I would say I was probably putting in $100 effort or $1,000 level effort, which is just run of the mill. If I was honest with myself, I was, in the past just swiping, getting dating fatigue, also getting a little bit jaded, which is why I said my top advice for dating is just don't get jaded. Throughout that process, I was okay, well, I would like to put more effort into this. So this is why I started creating a list of ways I want to joyfully create my dating life. And that list was okay, well, a Hinge subscription for 6 months is $150. Okay, that's one investment. Another investment is working with my friend who's a dating coach. Let me just see what he has to say. I could probably use some help. He's been super helpful and insightful so far. Let me put together a matchmaking thing that I heard about years ago. So all this is more like, okay, now I feel like I'm raising my level of like intention such that it's not so much like, oh, I'm dropping 100K on this. But energetically, it's like, I feel like I'm putting a 100K plus type of intention and effort now.
Ooh, I love that. I love that whole framework. Just to highlight for our listeners, this is reflecting on like one of the most important things you're doing in your life, which is finding your life partner. This is the person you're going to be on this journey with. How would you monetarily put a number on your current effort? And how important is it to you? Like, how much is the appropriate monetary effort? Whether you're actually spending the money or the time, regardless, I think that's a really good way to think about it.
I agree. I love this idea of like $100 effort versus $100,000 effort versus $1 million effort. Just in general, as thinking about, I have this goal. In this case for you, it's dating. Like, am I really taking my dating seriously? And you can measure that. I think of that myself. Okay, all my apps are free. I don't really pay for my dates.
That's different.
But I was thinking, honestly, like if I was like serious, like if I was like, okay, what if I put like $5,000 towards my dating? I'm gonna go on Hinge. I'm sorry, $100,000. I would go on Hinge. I'd be like, look, we're going to the steakhouse this weekend. You seem like a really great guy. Treats on me. Let's see like how this works. Or like, you know what? You're cool. I'm gonna fly you out here. Like,
what a boss move.
Soul talk. I'm sorry if you followed me here from Hinge. This is not true. No, but I mean, I don't know. Like when I think about that, it's like, you're right. I think when we get jaded, we start to look at like the negatives. Like, oh, I spent my night there, my evening. I spent, $5 on gas. And I don't know. I just think that we focus too much on the negatives versus when you flip it and you're like, this is a problem I want to solve. Like, I'm trying to find a partner. I'm trying to start a business. Like you said, the same thing about your UX business. If I took that money and I applied it to myself and I put real effort into this, what would that look like?
Totally. And it's like when you said it, I was like, it's funny because I thought about just different things we've been thinking about. And I'm like, we've probably put more effort into deciding which dehumidifier to buy than who we're going to date or like, that kind of thing. So so it made it very clear to me like, oh yeah, like this is something important.
I won't tell you how much time I sunk into researching the perfect performance slim fit joggers. Recently, I was like, which we're illustrating the point of like how much effort do we put into our job search? Because it's so direct where, okay, this job is going to pay me $100,000, $150,000, right? People kind of put the requisite amount of effort into that to get that result. Not to make this less romantic, but more like energetically, if something's really important to you, what's the level of intention and effort you want to put in? And it doesn't have to be all serious. It's not like, all right, I'm now going to go from 10 dates to 1,000 dates. It might be more like, let me play with it. Let me, perhaps there's this book that I've been putting off about dating that I want to invest my time in. Perhaps it's a spiritual retreat for myself to really get in tune with myself and develop that aspect of myself, which is something I would want to do, partner or not. Or it might be, hey, I'm willing to fork out $5K for, for a friend referral. It could be any of those things.
I love all of that, Oz. I am actually so excited after speaking to you about that. I do have to ask you a final question that I'm sure anyone listening to this is wondering. I'm wondering it myself. Have you had any success yet with your matchmaking program or your Date Me doc?
Yes. So...
You're married.
Yeah, I have 3 wives now. Don't know how that happened. Just kidding.
Like, this thing is amazing.
So, yes, on the practical level where my friends have introduced me to some like great people. I don't think I've met like my wife yet, but I so appreciate my friends and, the people that they put me on blind dates with and things like that, where I feel like the message is getting out there and I just feel so grateful for my friends that they even, are playing along in this way and like playing this game of love with me.
Ooh,
That's how I see it.
Ooh.
On the more like cheesy personal level, I just feel like, I am having more fun with dating and love. And that's the spirit I want to carry with me as a single person, as a person in general, and like, going into partnership. I don't think I'm going to really find my love being like really sad and feeling all grudgy about it. So it's been fun. And I think that's really the spirit I want to share with people, which is like, not only don't get jaded, but on the other side of being jaded, it's like, it's okay to take a break. And what have you made it fun?
I think that's a great place to wrap up, Oz. What you just said is so important. There's so many great wins, not only just having the opportunity to meet new people, but also this playing the game of love with your friends, like having them involved, having them excited, making it a community effort versus just like it is hard if you just are doing it yourself and you're just swiping and you're like, man, like catch me on a bad day. I'll be like, man, nobody loves me today. Like I'm not getting any attention. Everybody sags. And I think that it's a lot more fun. And not only more fun, more positive. Like I think when I think about how I talk to my friends about dating, the past few years have flipped the script because it used to be more fun to tell the bad stories. And it was so focused on, oh, men suck. Oh, hear this terrible date. And there was a certain point where I was like, I'm manifesting this because this is all I'm talking about to my friends. They just think I'm having all these negative experiences. Maybe they're starting to think that I'm the problem.
That's the more fun story is like the negative story, or that's what it seems like. But I love how this is like a reframe in a positive way. And then also getting all your friends to like put a positive energy towards you as far as like finding your soulmate.
Yeah, everybody's rooting for you now.
Yes.
Wealthy Spirit is rooting for you.
Everybody at Campfire.
Everybody at Campfire. Like we're excited.
Yes.
Your followers.
Oh, that feels so good to receive. Yeah, it's been so fun.
So will you share with our listeners where they can find you? Maybe if they're a single listener or they know a single listener, where they can find your matchmaking program if they're interested.
Yes. And also, I mean, you give such a great framework, even in this episode, where we're speaking more about love, about money. And I just want to emphasize that you are so well articulate about not just money, but something that we really believe in, which is building a lifestyle that's along with your values. So where can people find you if they're looking for you, either for love or if they just want to follow more of your writing?
Yeah, my internet home is my name. So that's Oz Chen. That's OZCHEN.com. And then it's just like the slashes for some of the pages that we talked about, like /newsletter if you want to be on my newsletter, where I love writing about psychology, money, and lifestyle design. And then once again, just like I think at the top of the podcast, it's ozchen.com/matchmaker, where you can find like the links to like, why am I doing this? How is it structured? I also have made templates for people who are interested in doing this themselves. So
awesome.
All that's like linked on my website if you want to play this dating game yourself.
And we will link everything in our show notes too, so that you can easily find it.
Thank you, Oz, for coming on Build a Wealthy Spirit.
Thank you, Oz. It was such a joy to have you. This was such a fun conversation.
Thanks, Andy and Michelle. It's a pleasure.
Takeaways.
Sammy, I loved that conversation with Oz. I had so many unlocks and takeaways from this conversation. I actually feel a little bit more excited about dating and like getting back on the apps and stuff. So I'm really excited about the conversation we had with him. And I think there were some good takeaways.
Yeah. First thing, I love his fun approach to dating and finding his future partner. Sometimes these things like dating can just seem like such a grind. And he really like flipped the problem and is like, I'm going to do this in a fun way, in an exciting way, in a way that can engage my friends, but also in a really dedicated way. And I like that whole approach.
Yes, specifically, I like his rule, like I am not going to date jaded. I'm going to have 3 months on, 3 months off. And that was just the first creative take that he took when it came to approaching his dating life. So I think that if you're somebody who is dating or somebody who's on the apps and you're feeling a little bit jaded, or if you're feeling tired, maybe it's time for a break. Or like Oz, maybe there's another creative way that you can move forward that is also fun.
I also like how the matchmaking program incorporates his friends. And even the Date Me doc shows his friends and people who know him what he's interested in. It's energetically getting all these other people invested and excited about you finding your future partner, your soulmate.
It makes sense, Sammy. When you put your dreams out into the world wide web, you are manifesting something great. And like he said, the Date Me docs, the matchmaking program, it's him taking it into his own hands, but not in a way to be just trying to be obsessively controlled about the process. The focus is about the joy, about bringing in people that he loves and being able to show a side of him to them and encourage them to be a part of this journey for him. So I really love that. And I think that's great because whether you're single or you're in a relationship and you have friends who are single, maybe this is a cool project to work on together.
Exactly. And the final thing that I loved was I loved his $100 versus $100,000 investment approach. I think that's just a great way to frame not only dating, but any problem or any investment in your life. It's like, how much are you investing versus how much should you be investing? How much is like an appropriate investment compared to how much you value this item? So for dating, he's like, yeah, in the beginning, maybe like $100 max, but actually finding his future spouse is a much more important investment. He's willing to invest more. And what would that look like?
I agree, Sammy. I was joking a little bit with him when I was saying, you know, if you got $100,000, you could ball out with every man in Charleston. But when I think about it, it's true. Like you're thinking, okay, should I invest in the premium? Should I invest in having a referral number for my friends? The dollar amount really makes it clear, especially when you're hearing that some person with the ChatGPT subscription is charging $100,000 for matches. It's like, okay, cool. I don't need to even spend $100,000. I don't even know how I would spend $100,000 to find my person. But it is an important problem, and I'm willing to invest money into it.
Let us know. Have you guys been inspired by this episode? Are you guys going to be doing your own matchmaking program?
Send us your Date Me docs. We will share them on our newsletter if you do.
Ooh, yes. If you send us your Date Me docs, we will share it on our newsletter.
buildawealthyspirit.com. And if you have a cool idea or if you've done something cool, creative, you know, a friend, leave it in the comments. We would love to hear about it. You know, dating can be so boring these days. Swipe left, swipe right. If you're doing something cool and different, we'd love to hear about it. buildawealthyspirit.com.
And most importantly, be sure to join us next time as we put down the rulebook and we rethink the status quo.